And the man said to the dentist, "Thank you very much." And he paid him a lot of money, and he went away with perfect teeth, and they all lived happily ever after. Oh, hi, how you doing? I'm busy here writing a little story about a dentist. Today we're going to look at
So we're going to combine the comma rules 1, 2, and 3. But first, a quick refresher. I'm not going to spend too long on this. I just want to give you a refresher in case you missed one of the earlier videos. So comma rule number 1, subject and verb. What's our subject here? First noun is our subject. Became, stuck, verb, right? Comma in a conjunction. That tells us a new clause is coming, right? Subject, verb. Here's another comma and a conjunction, so we would expect another clause. Subject, verb. So comma rule number 1 is working. Commas and conjunctions go together and separate clauses. And when we see them together, we can expect that a clause is going to follow. So here we have a new sentence, starting with a subject and a verb. So straight away, we've got a clause, comma and a conjunction. It's a new subject, a new verb. Repairman came within minutes and everyone was rescued within 30 minutes. Okay, great. Now, if you are in the habit of starting sentences with words like but and so, stop that now. Avoid that. They have a specific purpose as conjunctions. You don't want to start sentences with conjunctions in academic writing. Now, you will see this in creative writing. You will see people do that all the time, and they're allowed to break the rules because they are artists. And the good ones know the rules and know how to break them. But in academic writing, we don't want to start sentences. Now, you won't hear a crash of thunder, and you won't be struck by a bolt of lightning if you do that. But try and keep them for the purpose that they're meant for. We're going to look at transitional phrases later on. Words like however and therefore, and you can start sentences with those. So quick review, comma rule number 2. There's our subject, there's our verb, there's our subject, and there's our verb. We've got a comma separating the two clauses. We don't have a conjunction, and the reason is because there is a conditional phrase at the start of the sentence. Because the elevator became stuck, the occupants became anxious. Here's another conditional phrase, once. So once the repairman came, subject verb, people were soon released. So they weren't released until the repairman came. So this is a conditional phrase. Once the repairman came, comma, the people were soon released. As soon as I see a sentence starting with a conditional phrase of any kind, and we've looked at some of those already in comma rule number 2, we know that there is going to be a particular type of structure to the sentence. Comma rule number 3, and this is where we take the clause and we split it right down the middle, and we insert extra descriptive elements. Repairman is our subject. What is the verb that goes with repairman? Well, the commas let us know. The repairmen were proud to have been of service. We have a comma here and we have a comma here. And that's telling the reader that, hold on, before we go any further, I'm going to give you some extra descriptive information. The repairmen, who had been trained at the best elevator repair college in America, were proud to have been of service. So there's the verb. And we could simply say the repairmen were proud to have been of service. But we're splitting the clause in half and popping in a little extra information. The elevator company is the subject. There's the verb. The elevator company gave them a bonus for being such good guys. Okay, by the way, The elevator company had been in business for 100 years. So the elevator company, comma, which had been in business for 100 years, comma, gave them a bonus. Yes, good. Now, so when we start combining comma rules in sentences, there are two other things that we've already looked at. We're just going to touch on these very briefly. When we have an introductory phrase, there's no clause here. It's just an introductory phrase, but that comma there tells us where the clause is starting. Subject, verb. This morning, I went fishing down at the pier. In the hot sun, I sat for 3 hours. So there's no clause here. There's no subject and verb in this phrase. So that comma lets you know, hey, this is where the clause starts. So introductory phrases, you quite often see commas. And we also looked at when we have a change in tense. Jack ran back to his car. This is simple past tense. We have a subject verb. Jack ran back to his car, worrying the whole way whether he would have a parking ticket. And there he is worrying. So we've gone into progressive tense. ing words. There's our subject and verb. So he ran, simple past tense, worrying, progressive tense. So sometimes you'll see a comma used when there's a shift in tenses, and this is particularly likely in creative writing. Okay, so we've reviewed the basic comma rules now. So what happens when we start combining them? Well, we're going to start out with something that's really quite complicated here. There is quite a lot of information in this first paragraph here. Today, because the delivery of the new copy machine was delayed, we did not get copies of the schedule of events to all the attendees on time. So we expect there will be some people who will arrive later than expected, and we need to make arrangements to meet them when they do finally get here. So how many clauses have we gotten here? Well, let's not count them just yet. The first punctuation is after the introductory phrase. Then we have a conditional phrase, so we know what the structure is going to be here. Because the delivery of the new copy machine was delayed, comma, we did not get, subject, verb. We did not get copies of the schedule of events to all the attendees on time. So, comma in conjunction, subject and verb. We expect there will be some people who will arrive later than expected, comma in conjunction again, subject, verb. So how many clauses have we got? The delivery, here's the subject here. The delivery, it's of a new copy machine. Because the delivery of the new copy machine was delayed, we did not get copies of the schedule of events to all the attendees on time, so we expect there will be some people who will arrive later than expected, and we need to make arrangements to meet them when they do finally get here. So there's a lot going on here. There's a comma rule for introductory phrases. There's a comma rule for commas and conjunctions. And so you can see these make it clear for the reader how you've created the structure in this paragraph. And if you don't have this structured properly, this information can become quite difficult for the reader to decipher. So again, we're creating a little code. These commas are your friends, commas and conjunctions, and they help the reader. So it's summer here in Carpinteria, so let's have a look at a sunny Sunday afternoon. After lunch, another introductory phrase. First clause. There's no condition here. I left to go to the beach, but I forgot my towel, my sunscreen lotion, and my favorite book, comma, so I had to return home to get them, comma, and I also had to stop, that's a typo, to gas up the car on the way back to the beach. Period. Okay. So simple introductory phrase, but there's our clause. The comma lets us know here's where the clause is starting. I left to go to the beach, comma, conjunction. I forgot my towel, my sunscreen lotion, and my favorite book. So here we have a list. Now here's something to take note of. When we see a comma and a conjunction in a list, it is not an indication that there will be a new clause. Now, if I put a comma here in a list, that is called the Oxford comma. And people argue over whether you should use one of these or not. Now, what I think generally is that once you recognize it's a list going on, you know it's being used for a list. And it's not followed by a new clause. We don't get the new clause until we get down here and see a new subject and a verb. But this is optional. The Oxford comma is optional. Some people say you don't need it. Some people like to use it. I like to use it, and I won't bore you with the details why. But I believe that the reader is quick enough usually to figure out that this is a list going on here. And even if they don't, they will see very quickly that I have a comma and conjunction here and a new clause starting. So they'll be back on track with the structure. Here we see a comma and a conjunction followed by a subject and a verb. So, I left to go to the beach, but I forgot my towel, my sunscreen, and my favorite book. So I had to return home to get them, and I also had to stop to gas up the car on the way back to the beach. The afternoon. Now this is a verb phrase, but as soon as you see a verb, you know you've got a clause. The afternoon was not as relaxing as I had hoped it would be, but at least I didn't get a sunburn. If Paul McCartney had used commas and conjunctions, this is what his song would have looked like. Yesterday, introductory phrase, subject verb, comma and conjunction. It is a pronoun, takes the place of a noun, and in this case, the noun would be the future, and now the future looks. So it looks as though they're here to stay. So I believe in yesterday. Dear me, what's happened here? We have an introductory phrase. We have subject and verb, comma and conjunction, subject and verb, comma, and a conjunction. Let's have a look at this for a minute. Last night I got horribly wrecked, then I went home with my best friend's girl. So he's super mad at me right now. He's is a contraction of he is. So keep an eye out for those tricky little contractions. It's contracted, it's squashed in. He is super mad at me right now.
So there we have combined sentences. Keep practicing them. Make some... I've got to go brush my teeth again. I'll be right back. That's better. So, have a go at making up some complicated sentences. Play around with the commas. Try putting sentences together in different ways. Once you're familiar with comma rule number 1, 2, and 3, do some reading. Have a look at a textbook or have a look at a newspaper. See how those guys use commas, because they know what they're doing. Most of the time they're pretty darn good writers, and I don't mean just something on the internet, because
Sometimes that's good, sometimes you're not so sure. See if you can grab a regular old newspaper, like the LA Times or something like that, and have a look at those writers and what they're doing. They know these rules and they use them very effectively because they are trying to deliver the most information possible to you, their reader. And they want to make sure you can understand it, so they work very hard to make sure their punctuation is correct. Thanks for watching this episode of How to Write. My name is Shaun Sanders. If you feel like donating, the link is right below. Next episode, tune in when we will talk about colons and semicolons. And they are based, the structure of those pieces of punctuation is based entirely on how commas work. So this is why we start with commas, then we'll move on to that. Thanks. See you again.